Airlines Confidential with Scott McCartney is made possible with support from Pratt & Whitney, committed to working smarter, cleaner, and greener today for a more sustainable tomorrow. PrattWhitney.com. Infinity Flight, the leader in Cadet Academy flight training programs. InfinityFlight.com. Ontario International Airport in Southern California. SoCal So Easy. And by Cirium, the world's most trusted source of aviation analytics, Cirium.com. We also welcome your business's support. Contact us at airlinesconfidential.com.
Welcome to Airlines Confidential. I'm Scott McCartney, and I'm flying solo for a little bit here on the podcast. Merry Christmas to all. I wish everyone a safe and warm and festive holiday season. All the guest co-hosts are out there helping Santa get that aging sleigh and its JT8D engines all around the world. So this week, I wanted to update you on some recent and important news, and I wanted to offer a holiday present in the form of a first-hand review of important new products from our roving correspondent, veteran airline journalist, and Airlines Confidential elf, Chris Sloan. Chris will join me in a bit. So let's start with the Spirit Airlines Christmas gift of $50 million from creditors to keep operating through the holiday season. Listeners will recall that Spirit was due a $100 million draw on its debtor-in-possession financing on December 13th. But Spirit had to meet certain financial goals to get that money, and it seems clear that Spirit didn't meet those goals. Creditors didn't go all Scrooge on Spirit, however, and they agreed to lend half the money now and the other half if Spirit meets new goals, or if it gets to a merger or sale that is acceptable to the creditors. And that's where Frontier Airlines comes in. Frontier never really left the Spirit situation, but there were stories this past week saying Frontier and Spirit had, quote, restarted merger talks. It's not like someone threw chairs and walked away at some point and broke off merger talks. I think Frontier has been clear all along about what it wanted and what it didn't want. And Spirit has been acting accordingly, getting rid of half of its fleet, for example, giving up gates at certain airports. Spirit has been shrinking to what Frontier wants. Frontier Chairman Bill Franke isn't the Grinch here, but he doesn't want to be Santa Claus either and, take everything at a price that's not going to work for him. Frontier wants to take what it can from Spirit that will work for Frontier and at the right price. Will they strike a deal? My guess is they will. Spirit has seen Frontier as its last best hope for maximizing any value out of bankruptcy. And Frontier wants to be the one big low-cost discount airline in the U.S. until new startups come along with lower costs and faster growth. Remember, Spirit Airlines itself isn't in charge of what's going on here. The creditors are, and creditors see a deal with Frontier as the best way to maximize the value that's left in Spirit. There is intrigue on the Frontier side of this as well. Frontier CEO Barry Biffle, who has led Frontier for more than 11 years and worked for Bill Franke before that at Spirit Airlines, was suddenly out, like real suddenly. Jimmy Dempsey, a Ryanair veteran who has been CFO and then president of Frontier, himself there for more than 11 years, he was named interim CEO. Did Biffle and Franke clash over what to do about Spirit? I doubt that. They seemed in alignment all along through a couple of previous offers for Spirit. We don't know. The timing is obviously curious. Was Bill Franke unhappy with Frontier's performance and had it in his mind that if Barry didn't start producing profits, this would be his last year at Frontier? Maybe. I think that's a possibility. Through the third quarter, Frontier has posted losses of $190 million this year. It had small profits through the first 9 months of 2024 by comparison. But like other low-cost airlines, it has struggled to earn any money post-pandemic and its stock price has suffered. Stock price suffered a lot more when it announced that Barry Biffle was out as CEO. But bottom line, a majority owner can't be happy about continued losses. I'll give you one example of Frontier's issues. Aircraft utilization per day has been declining, only 8.7 hours per day in the third quarter compared to 10.2 hours a year earlier. The engine problems that have grounded so many A320s certainly is a factor in that. But that's not all of it. And it's really hard to be a low-cost carrier if you're only flying planes 8 or 9 hours a day. You need to be much more efficient and get a whole lot more flying out of those very expensive assets. Frontier's unit costs, excluding fuel, were up 16% in the third quarter. And Frontier doesn't yet have a new contract with its pilots and we see this at other airlines, that could increase labor costs. The last pilot contract in 2019 became amendable in January 2024, so almost 2 years ago. So is it just that Barry did not hit his goals? I think there are more shoes to drop in this story. Jimmy Dempsey, the new interim CEO with his Ryanair background, he's going to push for all the low-cost moves he can. I understand he's been the one pushing Frontier to stop using jet bridges in as many places as possible, for example, even in very chilly Denver. Jet bridges slow in operation by a few minutes every turn because it takes time to dock and because passengers enter and depart from only one door in the front. With hard stand operations, you can wheel upstairs or a ramp. You can unload and load from the front door and the back. Shave a few minutes off the schedule with quicker turns. And that gets more utilization out of the aircraft, saves you money, and helps you be a low-cost operation. Dempsey is an interim right now, and it's unclear if he's the guy Bill Franke has his eye on or someone else, especially if there is a Frontier Spirit merger who's going to put those two together. Maybe it's Dave Davis, the current Spirit CEO, who seems to have done an admirable job guiding Spirit through crisis since April. Davis is an experienced airline hand who was CFO of Northwest before it sailed to Delta and president of Sun Country. And one other touch of intrigue with the Spirit Frontier story. You may have seen the news that two Mexican discount airlines, Volaris and Viva Aerobus, are combining in one holding company if they get regulatory approval. It'll be the Volaris holding company, but the holding company will issue new stock to shareholders of both companies. They'll continue to operate both brands. Volaris and Viva are Mexico's busiest domestic airlines, and this transaction will likely get a lot of government scrutiny. And remember, this is much more of a financial transaction than an operation transaction. Sure, they'll connect passengers to each other. If they're under the same company, they can cooperate on pricing and scheduling and everything else. But they're not going to be merging seniority lists. They're not going to be repainting airplanes. They're not going to be reducing or combining into one brand. Volaris, remember, is controlled by Indigo Partners, Bill Franke's investment company. So is Frontier. So this is the connection. The chairman of Volaris is Bill Franke's son, Brian, who's also on the Frontier board. The two Mexican airlines are calling this a merger of equals, and shareholders of each company will control 50% of the stock in the holding company and 50% of the seats on the board. The slight bit of curiosity to me is that Brian Franke won't be the chairman of the combined company. The chairman of Viva will be. So maybe Indigo is planning to sell some of its shares as this transaction happens, and maybe that provides some easy cash for a Spirit deal. It also could be that one has absolutely nothing to do with the other, and the timing is just coincidence. So, as we like to say, stay tuned. One other huge departure in the airline industry was announced. As expected, Delta President Glen Hauenstein will retire at the end of February. Tributes will be many, and we look forward to having Glen on Airlines Confidential. Glen Hauenstein is one of the smartest, nicest, savviest people you will ever meet in any industry. He was a strategic genius at Continental Airlines and then at Delta. In his 20 years in Atlanta, he propelled Delta to the profit powerhouse that it is, the key architect of the premium strategy and the powerful global network. Richard Anderson, of course, gets a lot of credit. Ed Bastian, of course, gets a lot of credit. But Glen Hauenstein has been the wizard behind the curtain on many things at Delta. Every conversation I've ever had with Glen Hauenstein has been a delight. He's one of those guys who is 3 steps ahead of the rest of us, and yet he never acts like he's the smartest guy in the room. Delta has benefited enormously from Glen. Travelers have benefited enormously from Glen, and competitors as well, because he's raised standards in the industry. He's taught everyone new ways of running airlines profitably, and he's just made everyone up their game. To that end, Brian Summers, who writes a newsletter called The Airline Observer, did an interesting piece calling competitors and asking them about Glen. For example, Andrew Nocella, United's chief commercial officer and a genius network builder in his own right, said this: "I think he is the biggest and best at what he does in designing networks and commercial products and understanding how it all fits together." Nocella worked with Glen at Continental when they turned the Newark hub into a European gateway rather than just a domestic connector. Competitors who have been the target of Hauenstein assaults tip their hats as well. Marty St. George at JetBlue, for example, even though he's battled Delta fiercely in Boston, had a lot of really great things to say about Glen. And Jude Bricker, the CEO of Sun Country, who has matched wits with Delta in Minneapolis, also has a lot of admiration for Glen. Okay, one other news note. Memphis has officially renamed its airport the Frederick W. Smith International Airport, honoring the legendary FedEx founder. Nice touch. The change is pending FAA approval. Before we bring in Chris Sloan, I want to thank our sponsors for giving us the gift of Airlines Confidential all year long. Thanks to Ontario International Airport for its support. Ontario International Airport is celebrating a decade of local control. Thanks to public support, the local community reclaimed ONT, revived it as a vital gateway in Southern California, and ensured the airport is ready to soar even higher in the years to come. Visit flyontario.com/10 to learn the story and find out how you can join the year-long celebration of how a decade of local control has turned ONT into one of California's fastest growing and most economical airports. In addition, thanks to Pratt & Whitney. At Pratt & Whitney, the pursuit of more sustainable aviation is foundational. For decades, Pratt & Whitney has been at the forefront of revolutionary advancements in aircraft propulsion technology. And by working smarter, cleaner, and greener today, they are committed to supporting the aviation industry in its goal of reaching net zero CO2 emissions by 2050. Learn more about Pratt & Whitney's smarter technology, cleaner fuel, and greener business at prattwhitney.com. I also want to thank Infinity Flight Academy, the leader in Cadet Academy training programs, for helping us bring this podcast to you. Whether you're looking to build a custom pipeline or strengthen your existing cadet program, Infinity Flight Academy delivers consistent airline-ready results. And for those of you listening who've always dreamed of flying or know someone who has, Infinity Flight has trained thousands of students, many now flying for major airlines around the world. Learn more at infinityflight.com, Infinity Flight Academy, where future airline pilots take off. And by the way, what a great Christmas gift a life-changing enrollment at Infinity Flight Academy would be for somebody. Just keep it in mind as a last-minute Christmas gift. And as always, thanks to Cirium for helping make this podcast possible. Cirium offers the most accurate and precise data and analytics to enable airlines to optimize planning, operations, and passenger services. The right intelligence drives operational efficiencies, enables you to predict market shifts, and helps airlines respond quickly to maximize revenue, manage costs, and seize commercial opportunity. Visit Cirium.com for more. All right. As longtime listeners know, Chris Sloan has been part of the Airlines Confidential family from the beginning, an OG Airlines Confidential contributor. Chris has brought us fabulous reports and observations from around the world. This time, his adventures are more domestic, but not really much shorter. He actually flew from coast to coast and back again on American Airlines' new A321XLR with its new flagship suite premium product that American hopes will make it more competitive against Delta and United. And not leaving any premium stone unturned, Chris was also at JetBlue's JFK Lounge unveil. So, pampered and primped, just kidding, not really, weary and worn out, Chris joins us again. Welcome back, Chris.
Thanks a lot, Scott. It's always great to be back in the Airlines Confidential Clubhouse, and with
awesome.
a few more advantage miles under my belt and a few more battle scars.
well, let's talk about the advantage miles first. This is not just a new airplane for American. It's kind of a new strategy. Tell us what the big picture is to what's going on at American.
Well, backing up, I mean, as any listener to this show knows, or any observer of the industry, American has kind of been derided a bit as the premium laggard. I mean, laggard in many ways, but certainly there's a lot of comments made, even on this podcast, that there's really only room for two premium carriers. And this is, been a big year where American is challenging that assessment and doing it pretty boldly. And, I sometimes joke, in full disclosure, I fell in love with this business because of American. I've been American Executive Platinum for many and customer for many, many years, and they're the predominant airline I fly. And I joke that sometimes it should be renamed Meh-rican, kind of like meh. But also at the same time, it's bifurcated many times, and often it is a fantastic operation. It's really can be a tale of two cities. And this particular year, you could say with the introduction of the 7879P, which I think they have 5 or 6 now, which had a completely new premium cabin, and then the XLR, and then now the 777 is getting its glam up, is really American's statement that they are premium and that they can compete. And, really, I think even if you look at the strategy, the big picture, which, we'll start to drill down on is, American obviously took a lot of grief because they retired a lot of the long haul equipment, during COVID. But the XLR, these 789Ps are allowing them to maybe not be less reliant on their partners, but to be a little more aggressive in the international flying because they've been so concentrated on domestic because frankly, they haven't had, a lot of the equipment to do that. So this is really about product. This is really about, legacy, kind of a brand statement. And it's also really about, I think, a pretty significant strategic shift that we're finally starting to see. And you root for it. And what's special about this flight, this is the 100th anniversary of American Airlines. And this particular route, this is the route of all of them that domestically that, it's a $300 million worth of revenue between New York, LA, and San Francisco that is divvied up. And, this was the route that, 1959, the very first domestic regularly scheduled jet service was on, and that was American in January of 59. So this has always been a flagship and important route that really sets the tone for the entire company. In fact, the flight AA1, AA3, I was on AA3, AA5, the lowest number of flights, those are actually these transcon flights. So really the flagships, over the North Atlantic and this really send a message that American is, I don't think they're marketing the overall offering yet, but they really are trying to correct that assessment and right maybe some of the wrongs. And that of course goes with the hiring of now they have a new chief commercial officer who was a recent guest on Airlines Confidential and a new customer, an executive in charge of customers. So, American, I think,
who was also a guest not too long ago.
Does it because I'm a guest? Does that mean I'm going to be CEO next week?
It could be.
But yeah, we can certainly talk about this particular aircraft and how they're going to use it strategically and what makes it so special because it is different. And for once, it's nice to see American once again be a first mover.
So let's start with the A321XLR. It's only got 155 seats. As you said, Transcon, so it's replacing that A321T that American had, or kind of replacing it, I guess. That was American's previous attempt to corner premium customers. That plane, also an A321, right? So same size cabin, only 102 seats. The latest sort of regular version of the A321 at American, the A321neo, that's got 196 seats. So tell us what you found on the airplane.
Well, I have an interesting way to compare it because I was on the inaugural back in 2014 of the 321T, which at that time was a game changer. And right and before that was a frequent customer on the 767-200. And what the 321T did, which was revolutionary at its time, is that it allowed American to, really lean into the smaller gauge aircraft. So they were allowed to, at that time, they created a very, very high frequency schedule. It's still relatively high frequency, but not like it was. So because it was smaller, it could fly nearly, I think during the weekday at one point up until, between the morning and 2:00, it was almost hourly. And at the same time, it allowed American to retain that true 3-cabin, LOPA, that configuration. And what American had that nobody else had, even to this point, is a true first class, flagship first product. And, at that time, there were only 10 of those seats. And really that flagship first class was, one seat on either aisle. It was actually much more like the business class seat that you had on the wide bodies. But it was very, very exclusive and really for those bankers and those very high and a lot of people in the entertainment industry, and it really drove corporate business. And even as American weakened in the New York, LA markets, the flagship remained very, very important. And at that time, they also introduced business class, so flagship business, which was 2 and a lie flat seat, and that there was 20 of those, and then there was only, as you said, 102 passengers, but there was 36 main cabin, 36 main cabin extra. Now, flash forwarding, the world has changed. And so the XLR, obviously, we all know they're removing the flagship first, which only exists on the 777-300s, that operate those flagship routes, and the American Airlines and the A321T. So they're removing that. And so they've replaced it with these new flagship business suites, which are similar to what we saw introduced back in June with the 7879P. So now they have 20 of these suites, and they're, we'll talk about the configuration, but they're enclosed very similar to what we, like JetBlue Mint has. And this thing with the doors and all that's become very much in vogue. And premium economy now, for the first time, American now is offering a true 3-class product. Actually, they're the first airline in the world to have 3-class product, true 3 cabins on a A320XLR. They're the 5th operator in the world to have the plane. But they actually have kind of a tweener replacing business. They have 12 premium economy seats, and those are in a 2-in-2 layout. By the way, spoiler alert, I love that cabin. And where the real shift is main cabin extra. There's very few of those seats now left. There's now 123 main cabin seats, but only 12 of those are actually the main cabin extra. So that's where you kind of took a hit. And that is not going to be, I don't necessarily believe, well received by people who don't necessarily want to pay up or for Advantage members. So I thought that was a bit of a sore point, but this is a challenging...
Or are restricted in what their companies will pay for.
Exactly.
For a 5-hour domestic flight.
Yeah, or 6 in my case. My back felt every inch of it. Now, I will give them credit. What American did do is, and they don't talk about it because American does a poor job often of talking about the things they do well, is they actually have a couple more inches of pitch in the regular seats than they do the domestic Neo. So your knees are not going to get crunched as bad. And so to their credit, the main cabin experience, there are still seat back TVs. There are still a lot of amenities there. And so that's an improved, that's in some ways a little bit of improvement, but it doesn't, the main cabin extra is only basically around the emergency exit. So, it's an important aircraft. And, And I think what makes the product, it's certainly elevated. I think the first thing you notice is that, American had this very austere, gray. Henry Hartevelt used to just beat them up over this. If you were colorblind, you could not tell the difference between American cabin. And so it was, but so now they've really, it's really beautiful. It's very sophisticated. It is upscale. There's beautiful finishes of nice woods and marble finishings on the table. And it just feels premium. And with the airspace cabin, the lighting, there's even the airspace XL, there's a beautiful lighting fixture that's at the L1 door. And so it does make a very, very solid first impression. And the suites themselves they're nice. There's definitely compromises. There's no flagship preferred. There's no extra legroom preferred. And so compared to the 787s, it's a narrow body plane. So there's going to be compromises, and you feel that. Right now, the doors don't work, which I find fine. It's they're waiting for certification.
That's an FAA thing. That's
an FAA thing. They give us 5,000 miles for that. And frankly, when you're sitting in the seat, you don't see anybody anyway, whether the doors are open or not. But if you're a prior first class flagship person, yes, this is not. This doesn't quite have the length of bed that you used to. But if you're in business, it's definitely an upgrade because you're one-on-one and direct dial on the bed, and you have a longer bed. But overall, if you're trying to compare a narrow body versus a wide body, it definitely feels a little more claustrophobic, particularly at the shoulders. And they've done a really nice job considering the real estate. But it's definitely a tighter feel than a wide body, and certainly where it's really tight is the aisles. And so that makes service. So, if you're trying to go to the lavatory while there's service, people literally, the flight attendants, almost have to step into somebody else's suite, which could be a problem with the doors closed. And, and so there's a lot to like here. And the IFE is brand new, the first use of it in America. It's the new Thales Avant Up. It's 4K. It's spectacular. The Bose headsets are now not collected before you land.
Didn't everybody hate that? No.
Hated it. Now you have AirPods that are Bluetoothable pairing. Mine did not work. A few others didn't work, but some others did. So but I don't know why you need your AirPods if you've got these, at least in that cabin. But I will say that the biggest design oopsie is that the monitor has to remain flush. You can't retract it during service because it blocks the service. And the flight attendants, the poor folks there who are already a little frustrated because the galley is so small, God help them when they're working in long haul international. They have to close the monitor to serve the meal. But if you're a pilot, you're going to love it because that's going to be that's where on the international flights, that's where the relief officer is. He gets a nice first class, or she does in there as well. But overall, the finishes, the branding. We saw this at JetBlue. We've seen a few other airlines. This is the same configuration essentially that United says they're going to do on the 10. But I would say that American has really upped the ante here, and maybe for the time being has leapfrogged, at least in hard product, their competition. And the soft product, very, very, again, bifurcated, very, outstanding. They say the only change to the soft product, they've added duvets and really lovely amenity kits. it, for all intents and purposes, is what first class was, except it's not as open. And they said that, we remove hot soup from that's the only difference in catering. So I don't think the first class flagship passengers are going to be missing too much. For my personal taste, is I do like a little more open cabin, especially in a narrow body, but that product is nice. The premium economy product, I think, is really the sweet spot, especially the price, the value. That is essentially a domestic first class product, but they have the privacy wings. The seats recline, pretty decent amount without disturbing anybody else. They're quite wide. They have. It's an intimate cabin. I wish it were larger. I think they're going to really sell it. Just if you look at the pricing alone on my flight, that cabin, main cabin was like $420. Premium economy was around $1,000, and flagship was $1,850 one way. So it's, there's a reason why premium is really a sweet spot. And even that is, again, compared to the wide body, it's a little bit narrower seat pitch, but you get 9 inches reclining, and it's kind of what old fashioned business was. And frankly, the seat was even more foamy, and still the presentation was beautiful, and the aesthetic, the finishes. They had Wi-Fi, wireless charging everywhere, and even nice amenity kits. So what the big picture here is, and then of course unfortunately we flew December 18th. We're about 2 weeks away from the rollout of American's free Wi-Fi, so I had the privilege of paying $30. Which was joyful.
Did you get a one-day pass since you were flying all day?
Because I had a lot of flying, I did my skip-lagging version of so I bought a monthly pass because at $60 with 2 devices, so I could report from the air. It was cheaper with only 5 flights of the year, and then I'll just cancel at the end of the year. And by the way, I hope they give me a refund anyway, because January 1st they say we're getting the AT&T. And by the way, you know what? It's always frustrating on the Transcon because you can tell when the bandwidth on it was stupid slow going westbound. And then I was like, if I paid for it, but going back east when there was fewer people, it was much better. But it's it's still Viasat. American has not elected to do the Starlink thing. But overall, I mean, you can definitely see the generational changes between the tech. The only bizarre thing that I noticed, and I'm not. Now I think I'm not the only one noticed, is that you have these beautiful 4K monitors, but apparently the only 4K movie, I hope you like Interstellar, because that's the only one they say in January will be built. And the other one that was totally bizarre, again, I don't want to shag them. The food was delicious. The service was very grateful. These are all first world problems, but I like to listen to music. And I guess because they have the Apple Music deal, for some reason, when I tried to just listen to music, it was like they downloaded generic YouTube creator music. There was not one band or artist I'd ever heard of. It's like, do they just not want to? Are they too cheap to license real music? It was all like, hey, wait, that sounds like a Creedence Clearwater. Oh no, that's somebody's weird cover where they've changed the notes. It was literally like, wow. I was asking other people, I was like, is it just me or is there no real music on this flight? But other than that, the coolest thing about the IFE, I just want to say, is you have picture-in-picture. So there's the whole 3D moving map is all, you can see that at the same time you're watching a movie. So
nice.
They're going to use this really strategically. They're going to move it really fast, but this definitely sends a message and makes a brand statement. And the speed of which they're going to roll this out, not only domestically, and the strategic way they intend to use this platform, which we should talk about, I think is going to be interesting, and United is going to answer that when they have the 737-10s, hopefully sometime next year. They'll begin answering that further. And then, it'll be interesting to see what Delta does. But this was what I was hoping it would be. I'm just sad that we're not going to have it at my home base of Miami to Los Angeles for a while, but it's coming to many markets pretty fast.
So, and I want to talk about the international markets and all, but the Transcon market, it just fascinates me because, when American went to the A321T and only 102 seats, really it ceded the coach market to Delta and to JetBlue, right? And American's market share declined quite a bit. Now you could say, well, they were happy filling the front of the airplane and operating an airplane that was a lot cheaper to fly across the country than a wide body. But I think Delta really, in particular, has really made hay in the Transcon market with putting international wide bodies in there, where you get the lie flat bed, you get the premium cabin up front. They also had premium economy, and then you got 150, 200 coach seats behind you to sell. And the coach seats on plenty of flights can be the break-even point, and the premium is gravy. And so I was a bit surprised that American has come back with the narrow body in that market, and kind of wonder if they're still going to be missing out, because as you described the product, if it's similar to an international business class product. That's what Delta's already got. What do you think?
I mean, I would agree with a lot of that. I think it was a different strategic call. The narrow body, as envisioned, allowed them to have similar capacity and similar seats as its competitors, but their idea was we're going to sell schedule. We've heard American speak about the schedule was the thing. And so when it was designed, obviously, the smaller gauge aircraft allowed you to run more frequency. And I think what they're trying to do here, and what they did successfully is that it was a consistent product on the transcons. And now as these 321Ts have come out, you're starting to see other things like 777s are on that route, where Delta and United, sometimes it's a bit of a hodgepodge. Sometimes you get some of the newer flagships. Sometimes you're flying some old creaky 75s and 76s. So at least American was consistent. And so, I understand what they do, but I think it's a correct observation that they're having to claw back, especially now the frequencies aren't what they were. So it's exactly what you said. And by the way, you pay for that because the lavatory situation, you when you're back there, you are keenly aware that you're on an aero body for 6 hours. And you have to, they're all in the back. And so it's like,
there's not a lav up front for the.
There is one for business and 3 for main cabin. But look, I'm an old man. I'd love to go back to DC-10s and 747s with piano bars any day, probably. But
that's not going to happen. But
that ain't happening.
Right. So let's talk about international markets and the narrow body international transatlantic stuff. We've seen a lot of it. And we've seen a lot of talk about this is the airplane that's really going to do it. What do you think? How's American going to start using it?
Well, I think what's interesting is they are, you would think an A321XLR that has up to 11 hours and 4,700 miles range. I mean, if assuming there's a lot of variables there, but that would be your max, that it would be the international airplane. And so so it's launching as the New York, LA, and then they're going to bring on in the spring, I believe, San Francisco in March, and then in Boston to LA will be in June. And then the first international route that it's doing is New York, Edinburgh. So we really had a chance to really dive into the network and the real strategy behind the XLR and how significant it contributes to the the next wave of American Airlines, and it's why it's a bigger thing in premium. So I spoke to Brian Znotmans, who is the Senior Vice President Network Planning, and he said, there's nobody here that's more excited than we are. I think they felt like they're dragsters that are, revving and ready to drop into drive and peel down the road, but they just haven't had the equipment because a lot of these aircraft, the 767s, the 75s, and the A330s were retired during COVID. So this plane has got them really excited to start getting their international mojo back, as well as a lot of the moves on Transcon. By the end of next year, the plan is to have the 321Ts totally replaced, and the XLRs will all fly. This new product is going to roll out fast. So by the end of next year, this becomes, you're using these long-range planes domestically. So you're like, well, isn't that a lot of plane? They say that 80% of the miles and the routes for the next few years flown by the XLR are actually going to be domestic, which is what Qantas is doing. They're not even using their XLR internationally in the beginning. And so the way they explain it is, you have to have consistency in the market because the 321Ts they're being converted back to regular 321s. And just from an efficiency and an operational and a spare perspective, that allows the airplanes to, instead of sit, all day or for a few hours on the turn in Europe, it allows them to use them interchangeably with this flagship. So now, what they said is don't expect a lot of the new sexy international route announcements for the XLR after, a few, until we get the whole domestic transcon conversion. They've got 40 of these on order, but by the end of next year, that quickly, supply chain gods willing, they will have this new consistent product on. And that when I say that, that's New York, JFK down to Orange County. That's Boston to LA and San Francisco. That's all Philadelphia. That's all their flagship first will be replaced. And then as they receive the next batch, that's when they'll start spreading their wings, so to speak, out of Dallas, Miami, and other places, even Chicago, like to say to Manchester. That's when they'll start seeing more of those international routes. And by the way, United will start taking theirs next year, and I would imagine they'll probably do some crazy, I don't know, San Francisco to Ulaanbaatar. It sounds like some they're the kings of the really interesting international routes. But so I found it interesting that American strategy, when I talked to Brian Znakins, is that it's not necessarily all going to be doing XLRE type things, from the beginning. That's going to kind of come later. But Edinburgh will be the first. And so, again, I think I got a little off. The three strategic uses are the new routes like the Edinburgh, or being able to do a seasonal route that perhaps you could not operate with a wide body. You'll down gauge in the spring or in the winter, or if they want to layer on additional frequency on an existing route, like I don't know, whatever that might be, but that allows them to put a second flight in at certain times of the year where they don't want to have two wide bodies, but they can have more. But I think the big overall cool thing about this plane as a network is that they're very excited because they've just been hammered so long because they haven't been able to participate in the international boom. And, like they like to hide behind the El Paso and the domestic strategy, but they're smarting from that. And so the network planning people in particular said, we're the most excited people because now they can actually, they're going to have the equipment pretty quickly now. So they're not always going to be accused of, well, we're just relying on our partners and just doing the flagship routes. They're now going to see hopefully more bold and interesting of these kind of new routes. And so I think that's a change for American, not just the product, but from a network standpoint.
Yeah, but it's interesting to me. I mean, you don't need that extra long range domestically, and you could the cabin configuration is one thing, but you could take one of their other A321s. In fact, the A321Ts that they're reconfiguring, you could reconfigure that to the new layout and use those planes domestically, and then have the new deliveries, going into international service where you might need the range.
Well, I asked them about that. That's a good point. They said, at this point, the 321Ts are getting, they're by that point, the newest ones are 10, 12 years old. And so their point is they're basically taking those out as it become times for their heavy checks. And so they're starting to all come up for their heavy checks rather quickly. And so, it's a legitimate question.
Yeah.
I said, well, why didn't you just take your Neos and your new because those aren't
right.
that old and convert? But they believe that this allows that efficient routing and much more optimized schedule because the airplanes that are coming from overseas now, it's almost like in Miami, when you have planes that sit all day, the large they can somehow integrate these into the system better. But I'm not.
Sure.
I agree with you. I was kind of
that makes sense. You could see it. Fly overnight to Edinburgh, come back. You're back in New York in the morning. You make a trip to LA, back, and then you're an evening departure to Europe. I could certainly see that. You get 22 hours a day out of the airplane.
Well, and they also, I think they're very important. The reliability aspect is, this is an expensive asset, and they said they're going to be by this way they can keep a spare in those flagship, the original bases in New York, so you can keep the spare up on the East Coast. And so we've lost a plane. We have got an AOG airplane on the ground on West, or we've got an airplane on the ground going East, so we can dispatch our spare either way and solve, two birds with one stone. So I kind of get their strategy. I think it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing about the transcon strategy is, when JetBlue came in with Mint, it really put a cap on business class fares. It really affected the pricing in the market for American, Delta, and everybody else, because Mint's a good product, and it was priced a whole lot cheaper than those guys were charging pre-Mint. And the other thing is United's going to be coming in, right? I mean, when United gets access to JFK through its partnership with JetBlue, I think I would totally expect first route for United is going to be JFK LAX. And here we go with more competition and more premium seats in the market.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there's been a lot of inventory dumped in that market, but there have been, and by the way, I mean, this market does not, obviously with work from home and post COVID, it's a different market. It doesn't have quite as many seats available. And an American, when it was, Alaska, in the Virgin, I mean, you've had a pretty significant player that kind of came out that removed itself. And but you're right. I think JetBlue Mint when it launched about 3 months after this, and it did change that. It definitely changed that market for sure.
Yeah. So speaking of JetBlue, what do you think of the new JetBlue Lounge? And I say that with I haven't seen it, but my first thought in looking at the specs is it's small. It's 9,000 square feet, and JetBlue is planning a lounge in Boston that's 11,000 square feet. And I looked up the Delta One Lounge at JFK is nearly 40,000 square feet. The Chase Sapphire Lounge at LaGuardia, which is really lovely. I've enjoyed that when I've used it. That's nearly 22,000 square feet. The issue for lounges has been overcrowding. And so is this going to be too small?
Well, it's New York. I mean, 400 square feet in New York is 2,400 square feet in Dallas. I guess it just depends what you're used to. But I think Christine made a joke on last week's podcast about the Friends episode or something, where it's like nobody in their right mind in New York. Remember when Friends? Nobody had an apartment that big in New York. But
right,
it is small. I think they did a really nice job. It's capped at 140 passengers, and certainly it does change the kind of the calculus on the access and who it's for. But you have to remember, it's in that terminal. It was never conceived. It was that was pretty much solely JetBlue's terminal. And then toward the end there, Aer Lingus and Hawaiian came in, and this was, I believe, it was an airspace premium lounge. And I was in it once. It was for Hawaiian actually when they used to fly out of there. It's actually down at that section of the gate where the wide bodies used to fly out. So as they admit, and as Christina said, and anybody in the airport side, is that, real estate in airports is gold. And and so they kind of had what they have to work with. And so to their defense, one way they want to combat this is they don't want to disappoint. So what's unique about the lounge is they don't want the lines. And so there is not going to be, you're unlike American, Delta, United. This was kind of a surprise. You do not get access if you're flying Mint Transcon. That is, and so you do get it with number one with a bullet with the Premier card. So that tells you something. This is a credit card revenue play.
Yeah.
You get it with the international.
As lounges are these days, right? I think
for sure.
Same story for Southwest.
Exactly.
It's going to be a revenue credit card play.
What do you call it? The Love Lounge? Is that what you were saying?
I said Love Lounge. Listeners will hear later. Listeners got an even better idea.
Oh, really? I mean, between Love Lounge and then something called a Blue House, we're onto something a little bit brandy here. So I don't know where you're going with this, Scott.
Well,
it's going.
It's not me. It's these airlines. I know. Well, I know Love Lounge was my idea. The listener is going to suggest Love Shack, which I like even better.
I love Shack. It's a little old place like the Blue Lounge, but
yeah.
But I would say one thing they did mention is, and also you're going to have access if you're Mosaic, I think 4, which is their executive platinum, wherever you're flying. So that's a bonus. They did moot that as the Terminal 6 comes on, that they are looking at identifying potential space for for where JetBlue would have a lounge. So this not conceivably is going to be the only lounge, and if you think this one's tough, they said
makes sense.
Fort Lauderdale might even be more challenging.
Oh, really?
And Fort Lauderdale, potentially, which is probably the third lounge. That is a rule. It's like, what are the rules there? Because there is not transatlantic. So these guys are taking a very step forward. They're not going to offer day passes until February. They're going to step change into it. They're not as liberal about guests. They are. It's 140 people max, and I think one thing they did that was really smart. It's a beautiful space. They like to say apartment. I thought it was kind of like the Soho House. It was like a hip club that I would never be cool enough to get invited to.
Yeah.
With cute little things like a photo booth where you can get your free little photos and a board game. It's very, very JetBlue, and every lounge is going to look different. The only thing bizarre that shocked me was they don't have Dunkin' coffee. They've got their own hipster New York food and beverage brands. But what I thought was smart is they, this trend we've seen with American United where they have these big grab and go catering, like provisions. What I thought was really clever here is that it's kind of incongruous with the space, but there's not going to be a lot of hot meals again, like a buffet, like these flagship lounges, nor showers. So what they did do is they've got these massive grab and go of wraps and salads and bagels, and there'll be some hot entrees, and they're going to have a kitchen later in the year. But this is located right at the entrance. So if you're somebody who wants to be able to dart in and just have like 10 minutes to, grab a meal, take something with you. You don't have to go navigate this 20,000 square foot lounge with a lot of people and do combat duty. It's on both floors, so you can quickly grab a drink, a coffee, and take a bunch of food with you. And it's I've never seen such it looks like a CVS with the big refrigerators of massive amounts of food, but it's the way it's very logical because it's right there at the entrance. So this is going to be smart because you can run in there quickly and do your thing. But it is a beautiful space. There's some really quirky little Easter eggs that only JetBlue would do, like a lot of the art is not only local, but it is designed by the employees. And they have
cool.
And they have this, like, because it's in New York, this little hotel behind they call it the Ask Me section. There's these little, like almost little mailboxes like you used to have for the key boxes at the hotel, but there's if you know to ask, there's little prizes that they offer you back there. So it's a 2-level lounge. It's really fun. It's going to be Boston's. The catering is completely different than you would see. And so what I like is it's almost going to be like I think Delta's done that well, where they each have the character where they're going to be. But it was playful. It wasn't pretentious, and the tech was really beautiful, and it was really just a special thing. I think my favorite feature was the roof. Looks like they've got an ode to Grand Central Station. So you look up and so but it's all their destinations, including I think Buffalo is up there. But a lot of there's like a Coqui frog from Puerto Rico and the Eiffel Tower. So the place is kind of like a love letter to New York. I mean, they've taken old Metro cards and made art out of them, and even the bathrooms look like. I mean, the bathrooms, frankly, I mean, it's a little creepy, I guess, to want to go, but the bathrooms are, I think, the most beautiful part. It's just they look like something you'd see like in a French patisserie, but special cocktails, and even the branding. I mean, it's like it doesn't say JetBlue; it says like you get these cool coasters that say BH with all these special hipster drinks and Joe Coffee and Steve Smith's tea. I mean, it was very, very hip, and there will be little hot, breakfast sandwiches in the morning. So I would say this place is kind of a work in progress, but they're going to really limit that access in the beginning and then kind of level set. And what I thought is the most interesting part about it is that it really starts to level set what their first class product is going to look like and what the time frame on that is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
You want to know a little about their first class?
Yeah, quickly.
They're not saying much. They are going to most likely use not a bespoke product. I think it may be the MIQ Collins seat that's kind of ubiquitous in domestic first. But what that's going to allow them to do is they want to roll this beginning prototyping. I think this by the middle of next year, and it's going to happen pretty quickly. So they say that mini mint, junior mint, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
I'm sure Marty St. George hates when people say it, but he says that this is literally a 1.5 to 2 year rollout. So that's going to be a pretty quick process to convert the fleet. And they're talking, that's the A220s and the 321s. And, kind of like the lounges, I think the one maybe downer is there's not going to be ovens necessarily. I think they're going to lean into a lot of the colder food. But you're already seeing hints. I flew even more. Even more is definitely there's more to it than legroom. And I think that's kind of a nice preview of where the first class lounge is going, and kind of the vibe and the style and some of the catering. I think the sensibility of the lounges kind of give you a sense of where they're going to go with premium. And I think that's, a real interesting process is all these jet forward plans. And there's a significant amount of revenue on the line here with premium seating and premium lounges. Southwest, as you talk about the Love Shacks and converting whatever these cabins are, if they do have a first class, it's going to take a long time. JetBlue has created something here. I think that they're going to be this is all about this jet forward plan to return to profitability. they've got something here that is going to allow them to move pretty quickly into the premium space. And I think that's probably the most significant part of all this.
Yeah, yeah. Very cool. Very cool. It's really good to see so much happening at JetBlue and, all part of that turnaround strategy that Joanna and Marty have going. And really, I think we all hope it's successful for them.
And Scott, if you permit me a quick shameless plug for the outlets I write for, you can read more about the Blue House and the XLR in Airliner World, RunwayGirlNetwork.com, and in Business Traveler Magazine and on their website as well. So thank you for letting me give them a little love too.
All right, Chris, this has been wonderful, as always. Thank you so much. Always appreciate your insights. We want to thank your back for holding up through all of this travel. And thank you very much for bringing this to us. It's been great.
Thank you. It's a blessing and a lot of fun, and have a great holiday. And I'm going to go back to swallowing Vicodin and Xanax.
Yeah, well, and I guess we're belated by the time this airs, but happy Hanukkah to you, and look forward to your next adventure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You have a great holiday too, Scott.
All right. We'll be back with some of the listener feedback that we've already previewed after this message.
Promotional support provided by the ultimate AvGeek website, thearchive.net. A vast collection of airline memorabilia, timetables, route maps, rare cabin and airport photos, special flights, and more. All at thearchive.net, the hub of air transport history.
Thanks again to Chris. Really fun stuff. All right, I wanted to share some of the feedback I got on the Doug Parker pricing episode. We knew we were putting out a long episode, and I'm sure some listeners didn't follow it all the way through. That's totally fine. We want to give you good, concise content. We understand some listeners may be all in on a topic and some listeners may not. I will say, if you didn't make it to the end, there were great revelations at the end and strong conclusion. And I think it was rewarding for those who did make it all the way through to hear Doug pull it all together at the end. In this case, we really thought the discussion was so interesting and compelling, and such a unique opportunity for people to hear both Doug's analysis and his explanations of how things work and why this is all so important for the business, that we went long. So I've been very curious about the feedback and very proud that it's all been great. Brian from Chicago offered this. Really enjoyed your show with Doug Parker about airline pricing. As a young flyer in the late 90s, more room throughout coach is what drew me and kept me at American Airlines. It was a noticeable difference, and I was sad to see it go. Those really were the good old days. Tim from Richmond said, Scott, I'm a person who has been critical of your interviews with Doug Parker in the past. To be fair, this week's episode was excellent, one of your best ever. I would heartily welcome more episodes with teaching content like this one. Nice work to both of you. And Ryan in North Texas also suggested more. Howdy, Scott, longtime listener, first-time commentator. Had to reach out about your last podcast with Doug Parker. Hands down, this was your best episode yet. It was quite obvious that Doug put a lot of effort into preparing this class for us. He did an outstanding job at conveying the material in a way that no doubt benefited people with all levels of knowledge in this crazy business. Doug alluded to the idea that there could be a whole other class on the art of scheduling. And to that I say, yes, please. It would be fantastic if this 101 series could become a monthly or quarterly thing focusing on various industry topics, things such as scheduling, the ins and outs of capacity, purchase, code sharing, interlining, loyalty, operations, understanding financial metrics like passenger revenue per available seat mile versus cost per available seat mile, yield, ASMs, etc. The process of how airlines collect fares and then reconcile it all after travel occurs, especially when it spans various carriers, would be another topic, and maybe a deep dive into the Essential Air Service program. So many of us can spend a full career in aviation and master our segment of the business, but then only have a cursory knowledge of the rest of the business. Thanks again for the great show each week. You and your guest host do an amazing job. Thank you so much, Ryan and Brian and Tim. Really appreciate all of you and all of our listeners who chimed in and who listened in. And one more on a different subject. Kevin from Madrid reacted to my suggestion that the Southwest lounges be called the Love Lounge, LUV, for Southwest famous stock symbol. Scott, for Southwest lounges, Love Shack is just sitting there, right? Merry Christmas, and thanks for all the insights into the industry. Well, Merry Christmas, Kevin. Merry Christmas to you all. We'll be off next week, and Airlines Confidential will return January 7th with Henry Harteveld and Jez Bowen, the CEO of Cirium, who will review Cirium's annual on-time performance report and the awards that go with that worldwide. It's something I look forward to every year, and Henry and I are actually both involved in this as members of Cirium's on-time performance advisory board. We'll no doubt have a lot to talk about, maybe even a new look or new name or whatever at in the low-cost carrier end of the U.S. industry. Happy holidays to all, and sincerely, thanks for listening. It has been an incredible year for Airlines Confidential. Our audience has doubled, and we send heartfelt thanks to all of you. So long, everyone. Merry Christmas.
This podcast is produced by Mass Media. Info@massmedia.net.